The town was quiet that morning, yet every step Emma took toward the wooden chapel felt like a thunderclap inside her chest. She was only 17, her hair golden and braided, under a lace veil that did nothing to hide, the fear trembling in her eyes. Around her, villagers whispered, some with pity, others with resignation. They all knew what was happening. Emma's father, weighed down by debts and the crushing grip of poverty, had sold her future to a man old enough to be her grandfather. His name was Silas McGraw, a wealthy rancher whose hair had long turned gray and whose hands carried both the strength of a worker and the greed of a man who always got what he wanted. Emma didn't look at him as they stood before the preacher. Instead, her gaze drifted to the dusty street beyond the church doors, silently begging for a miracle that never came. Her heart sank when the preacher asked if she would take Silas as her husband. She whispered the word yes, not out of love but out of fear, her voice breaking like a fragile glass against stone. The ceremony ended quickly and the crowd dispersed, but Emma's life had just entered a storm. Silas led her to his wagon, where her meager belongings had already been packed. The town faded behind her as they rode toward his sprawling ranch on the outskirts, and Emma felt as though her soul was being buried alive. The ranch house was large but cold, every wall a reminder that it was built not for love but for pride. That first night, Emma sat by the window, staring at the moon while silent tears soaked her dress. Silas, though stern, did not approach her harshly. He offered her a room separate from his own and told her she need not fear him. But Emma could not trust the words of a man who had purchased her like cattle. Days turned into weeks and Emma's heart longed for freedom. She would walk along the pastures, watching the horses run wild, imagining herself among them free and untamed. But then something unexpected began to stir. Silas, though distant, treated her with a strange gentleness. He never raised his voice, never forced her into duties beyond what she could bear. When she struggled with carrying water or tending the chickens, he stepped in quietly, his hands rough yet careful. Emma noticed how he often sat alone at night, staring at a portrait of a woman who must have been his late wife. There was sorrow in his eyes, a sorrow that mirrored her own. One evening, as the sun melted into gold across the horizon, Emma found herself sitting on the porch with Silas. For the first time, he spoke of his past, the loss of his wife, the years of loneliness, the ache that wealth and land could never cure. His voice cracked as he admitted he had agreed to marry Emma not out of cruelty, but out of desperation for companionship. Emma listened, torn between anger and compassion. She realized that while Silas had trapped her in this life, he too was trapped in a prison of his own making. The days slowly softened. Emma began to smile again, faintly at first, like a candle flickering in the dark. She started planting flowers in the barren yard, their colors bringing life to the ranch. Silas would watch from a distance, the corners of his lips curling into a rare smile. The villagers who once pitied Emma now whispered in surprise. She did not look as broken as they expected. Something unseen was happening between the young girl and the old rancher, something no one had dared imagine. As spring painted the land in green, Emma began to discover strength she never knew she had. Though she still felt the weight of her forced marriage, she realized she had a choice: remain a victim of her fate, or transform it into something no one expected. She decided to learn everything about the ranch. Every morning she woke before dawn, feeding the chickens, milking the cows, and even helping mend fences alongside the ranch hands. The men, surprised by her determination, respected her. Silas too observed quietly, his eyes softening with pride each time. He saw her riding a horse with her hair streaming like sunlight in the wind. One day disaster struck. A storm unlike any they had seen in years swept through the valley, tearing down fences and scattering cattle. Emma, without hesitation, saddled a horse and rode into the storm. Her dress was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, but she guided the terrified animals back with fearless resolve. The ranch hands shouted in astonishment. This was no fragile girl anymore. This was a woman of courage. Silas, watching from the porch, felt something stir in his chest. For the first time since his youth, his heart beat fast, not with greed or pride, but with awe. That night, when Emma returned exhausted and drenched, Silas placed a blanket over her shoulders. "You've given life to this place," he whispered, his voice trembling. Emma looked into his eyes and for the first time saw not the man who had bought her, but the man who had been broken long before she entered his world. Tears filled her eyes and she realized that something had shifted between them. Respect had replaced fear, and compassion had begun to take root where resentment once grew. Weeks passed and Emma's laughter filled the ranch. She organized gatherings for the workers, cooked meals that brought warmth, and planted a garden that bloomed under her care. Silas, once cold and reserved, began to walk beside her, sharing stories, dreams, and even laughter of his own. The town that once judged their marriage now looked on with amazement. The poor young girl who was forced into this union had not only survived, she had transformed it. But the true surprise came when Emma discovered Silas had quietly canceled her father's debts and arranged for her younger siblings to be educated at the town small school. "You deserve more than chains," he told her softly. "If one day you choose to leave, I will not stop you. You've given me more than I ever hoped for." Emma was speechless. For the first time, she realized she was no longer trapped. She was free. Free to choose whether to stay or go. And in that freedom, she found love. Not the love of passion and youth, but the love built from respect, kindness, and second chances. Years later, Emma was no longer the frightened girl from the chapel. She had become the heart of the ranch, the woman who turned sorrow into joy and despair into hope. Silas, though aged, carried a smile wherever he went, for he had discovered that love could be born even in the most unlikely of places. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, imagine how many more tales of courage and unexpected love await you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey, because sometimes the most painful beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings.